This is Bam Pow Comic Hour with your hosts Andrew Glonner
and Chris Ramos. Hello.
Today we are going to talk about one of the new indie books that have recently coming out in the past about 5-6 years. It's called Black Hammer. It's written by Jeff Lemire and art by Dean Ormston. Coloring is by Dave Stewart and letters are by Todd Killen. This Black Hammer Library Edition, Volume 1, that we were going to be discussing today, goes through Black Hammer 1 through 13 and Black Hammer Giant-Sized Annual. Black Hammer was written around 2016, 2017. This was put out by, I believe, Dark Horse. Dark Horse put it out, and it's one of their more original stories that Jeff Lemire has put out. He's one of the rising writers that have been coming out and been putting out great material recently, and we thought we'd share this with you today.
Yeah, and Black Hammer actually, as a hardcover volume, you should really look up some of the other Dark Horse hardcovers. Probably one of the more better known is the Hellboy library editions with the actual cloth covers, embossed inlays, just great volumes. They're really kind of showing the collected edition market how it's done.
Yes.
You know, it's not just throwing together some glossy pages and a cover on it. They're really putting together a showpiece and paying attention to things like, you know, is the spine lining up from one volume to the next? Or, you know, if you're going to put volume 1, is there going to be actual volume 2? Things like that.
Yes, and the paper quality is fantastic, and it's a nice, would you say it was matte?
Yeah.
The pages are matte, and they're thick.
They have the same paper, like with all of their library editions. I mean, even jumping around, the Hellboy ones are really, really nice. The color saturation is like very thick and just great volumes to have and own and to, you know, reread. And that's something I think you have to do with Jeff Lemire stories is once you're done with them, you can almost have to go back and reread them.
Yes, because once you get through, like, whoa, okay, got to pick up all the details and connect more.
All the puzzles have fallen into place.
Yes.
Almost all of them.
Right. And he created essentially his own superhero universe in this book.
Yeah, so Black Hammer is his thought on, well, it's not really like a deconstruction of the superhero community. It's just giving superheroes a anomaly. Like, you know, everyone knows that superheroes want to be superheroes. You know, it's like you have powers, you get your costume, and you go ahead and you fight crime. Jeff Lemire and a few other artists have tried to take that, you know, trope and just say, what if we took these superheroes and totally removed them after their largest battle?
Yes.
You know, what would the world do?
What's
what would
the
they
fallout
do?
like?
Yeah. Where would they go and what would happen? So I just want to touch on Jeff Lemire really quick because I don't want to assume that our readers and our listeners know exactly who these artists are. It's always nice to sort of throw around everyone's names as the writer because I think they get the most credit, you know.
Yes.
Especially when you have collected editions. That's sort of the point of the hardcovers. The omnibus that you see that are printed, the large volumes, huge collections, they usually pick one writer and just say, however long you were working on this book, we're going to turn it into a chunk of hardcovers.
Yes, a phone book.
Yeah. A colorized phone book with all of your stuff in there. And you can write the introduction.
Yeah.
And just say, wow, I remember working on this ages ago and thank you for collecting it.
Yep.
But that's the nice part is, you know, some writers, when they pull them into the comic studios, they say, all right, you can write a series like The Incredible Hulk and you can keep writing it until it doesn't do good anymore. Yeah. And sometimes that lasts like 6 months and sometimes it lasts 6 years. If you are someone like Jeff Lemire, these are stories that are what's called creator-owned stories. You know, this is his story. It's something he's worked on for most of his life. He's very upfront about that it's always been in the back of his head. Jeff Lemire actually wrote a few other standout comics. Sweet Tooth is probably one of his more well-known ones.
That's already getting developed into a TV show.
Yeah, and actually, Robert Downey Jr. is doing that. Yeah, and
it's exciting.
His studio is making it. Him and his wife have the Downey studio, and they're making it. The other thing that he worked on, the other main thing was Essex County, which was his first big story to sort of hit the indie market. And again, I don't want to leave anyone in the dust with terms, but the indie is just
something
independent.
It's something that's not Marvel or DC.
Because there's indie music and indie writers and things. So it's just not the big two, like Marvel and DC. And then you have the handful of other companies that are out there, like Vertigo and Dark Horse and Image. And if you're writing with some of those, usually it's a little easier to get into the market. So so all of those were what's called indie stories. And then in 2014, he signed exclusively for DC, and he was writing Animal Man is probably his biggest story at DC. And then he did some of the Green Arrow and eventually moved on to Marvel. So when he was at DC Comics is when Black Hammer came out.
Yep. And so our tale begins, and how I thought of Black Hammer, we were briefly talking about earlier, was a fallout and aftermath of this huge event that happened, and they call it The Event. And it takes 6 characters, and it takes this superhero team, the team, and it kind of puts them in the fallout of this huge event, and we get to see them kind of going through their everyday lives, but they find out they're trapped on a farm.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because you, as the reader, you're kind of piecing this together. The story just starts. Literally, they're just on a farm, and you're trying to figure out who these people are. And
Lost on Mystery Farm, issue 1.
Yeah. You can kind of tell a little bit that there's sort of some homages to superheroes, and they talk about being heroes, and then you notice
the good
right
old
away,
days.
Some of the characters you notice right away are like half aliens and half robots, and so you're like, something's up here, but no one looks happy.
No one looks happy in this book at all.
Even the colors don't look happy.
Right. But it's interesting because, in the big two, it's always, most books are like happy, or they're serious, or they're always fighting, or it's high action. This book's just kind of slowing it down and kind of seeing and diving deeper into the characters.
Well, they have like an identifiable villain or an identifiable sort of direction.
Yes.
And Jeff Lemire is very well known for a slow burn. So it's like, if he's going to write a series and you see that there's 3 volumes, or if you see there's 20 issues, at least by issue 10 out of 20 is when you're finally going to figure out, like, oh yeah, that's what's going on here. So it's like you got to watch half the movie to figure out what is happening. And, that's not for everyone.
Of course, but it's still it's very cool. He said he was also influenced by titles such as Watchmen and other comics that kind of deconstructed the superhero as well.
So, like the superheroes that are in this, I always kind of have to touch on the art side of it, the comic layout and the comic coloring, and as you're looking through the book, you get this idea that the heroes are what's referred to as golden age heroes.
Yes.
It's like way back when the early days of comics were, and there was a very clear line of, the hero is always silhouetted at night, and the hero is always,
a lot of cliches.
Like top of the mountain, top of the building. Everyone's always looking up to these bigger than life creations. And that's when they show the flashbacks of sort of their days of being superheroes. The colors really shift in the book too. They get brighter
Yes,
and they get
yeah.
like, I mean, would you call them classic colors or just
Yeah, I would say yeah, because it kind of starts out this horror. It's kind of cold colors, kind of sci-fi, and then it starts to then pick up once the story gets rolling and the mystery starts to dive deeper, and they do more flashbacks towards the golden age.
and then you kind of get to see each character, what kind of superhero they were. And then it sort of ties into the type of person they are now. So then you start realizing that they had a large battle, with a villain that sort of looks like a combination between Darkseid and Galactus or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking the
mashed it.
antimatter.
Yeah, they mashed it all up.
Yeah, they kind of did that. Yeah,
They're like, we're gonna take
it's called
all.
during this podcast there might be some spoilers into it, so take that for what it's worth. But the villain that we're talking about, this overarching villain, is called Anti-God.
Anti-God, yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's where I kind of thought, the antimatter, Anti-God
Yeah.
kind of thing.
and it takes like all of them to defeat him, and then they all just disappear after that battle.
Yep.
And the world is like, well, they saved us from total destruction, but
Yeah, I think it's like a 5-year time
they're
gap.
all gone.
Yeah, I think it's like a 5-year time gap, which is insane. Because they're like, oh, it's only been a little while. No, we've been here for a long time.
And then you notice right away, and that's the kind of fun part that Jeff Lemire does differently than other artists. So, or other writers. For me, it would be very easy to say, what would happen to Superman if he disappeared and went to another world and didn't have to be a superhero. It's very easy for people to just say, oh, well, he'll just, fall into, self-destruction, or he'll be really sad that he can't be a hero or something.
Yeah.
And some artists and writers would love to put that story together and just show every hero that was a hero, down on their luck. It's always, the typical storyline is to take someone that's at the peak of their performance and then just totally smash them down.
Yeah, similar to what like Bendis did with Daredevil.
Yeah. Just take away everything that sort of makes them higher above the law, and then just say, look, they're having truly a bad day.
Yeah.
And in the Watchmen series,
By Alan Moore.
They took that idea and they said no one's allowed to be a superhero. That's what it was in the Watchmen. But they weren't actually even superheroes. They were just people who said, we're going to fight crime whether the world wants us or not.
They took more of the vigilante to heart.
Yes, and they just said, this is who I am, and I've got a costume, and I'm going to take the law into my own hands. And it just eventually turned into, we're not allowing you to be superheroes anymore. Mm-hmm. And so if you just took that, I think, as a rule across the board and just said, okay, Marvel, or okay, DC, or, you're not allowed to be superheroes anymore. What Jeff Lemire does with his characters is he writes them as totally unique individuals, each character. And that's one of his strengths. Like one of his writing strengths is that he writes the person. He writes the story of them. And
that what I actually heard in an interview with the artist was, and I think him, that they drew it and then they kind of had to put the human characteristics in.
Oh, right.
Like superhero.
He knew what they wanted to look like. And then
just kind of have to flush them out and do that.
Well, and some people always say, that the characters in the books, they talk to them and they tell them who they are. J.K. Rowling's been very upfront about that Harry Potter and his gang sort of revealed themselves through the writing. But it's interesting with Jeff Lemire's characters because I was very easily able to put myself in their shoes.
Yes.
Like you just feel like you could be that character.
Right.
you
They're
know?
very grounded,
Yeah.
even though some of them are far from grounded.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of them are obviously like androids and aliens. And so, but he still writes them, and you still get a feeling like you're sort of sad for them, or, you want to figure out this mystery. And that's the whole point of Black Hammer, is somehow these characters are in a place that they don't know. They're in a city that they don't know, and they're in like rural farmland, which
Yes.
is one of
in a
his
one
things.
horse next to a one horse town,
Yeah,
and they can't escape.
and some of them are just trying to escape. They're
Yep.
The one girl, we should talk about her.
I guess let's back up a little bit and
Yeah.
talk about the characters themselves and
Yeah.
kind of do that.
There's 6 of them.
Yep, there are 6 of them. So their captain is Abraham Slam. Then we have Barb Alien, Captain Weirdo, Walkie Talkie.
Colonel Weird.
Colonel Weirdo. I apologize.
Colonel Weird.
Colonel Weird.
Yeah, his last name is Weird.
He's a very weird character, so it goes all over the place. Walkie Talkie, the android. There's Madam Dragonfly, and there's Golden Gale. I guess we'll start with Abraham Slam. Abraham Slam is their captain. He's kind of like the average Joe. He's not enhanced in any way.
No, he seems
might
like he's
have,
got
like-
super strength a little
Yeah.
bit, But he also just there's some times where you see where he wants to give up, but then it's just not in his nature, which is
Right.
an obvious like nod to Captain America.
Yes. Barb Alien, he's from another world. I think he's the classic like Mars alien. That was
Yeah,
kinda dropped
Martian
in.
Manhunter kind of
Yeah.
thing. He likes the cape, but
He has the shape-shifting powers.
and his true form is very weird, like very
Yes.
alien.
Yeah. And then Colonel Weirdo, he's this like space adventurer. He is like he's very his mind is all over the place. He's very scrambled.
Yeah, Colonel Weird was a nod to Adam Strange, and if you've seen some of the old Adam Strange comics, and we're talking the 50s and 60s,
Yeah.
they just went with every trippy space idea you could think of, poison, clouds and space
Very
matter.
sci-fi space adventure.
Yeah, and so he was an obvious nod to that because he has his ship and he traveled from planet to planet, and he gets lost in the Parazone,
Yep.
which sort of, I don't know, almost like a odd sort of infinity, time and space,
Avoid. Yeah.
Doctor Who kind of
Mm-hmm.
problematic area, and it just ruins his mind.
Yes, it does. It does. And he keeps going in and out of time and space, and time and space doesn't even matter to him almost anymore.
Yeah, he
So
sees
that's-
everything.
Yeah. But not at the same time. Like he's like, Walkie Talkie is kind of my favorite. Just because he has all these mannerisms and stuff, and he's trying to help out, trying to help out Abraham Slam, and he just gets like, oh no, just go away, dude.
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
Walkie Talkie was Colonel Weird's like,
sidekick.
yeah, his pal.
Yeah, you picked him up on another planet on a space adventure, and he's like, hey, come on. And he's like, oh, I can't leave. Well, we're gonna leave because this is a bad place to be.
And he kind of reminded me a little of the Lost in Space android a little bit. Just the way he wants to be there all the time with them.
Yeah. And then there's Madame Dragonfly, who is the most oddball and like the horror and the witch among them. And she dives into like the sorcery and magic kind of side of the things.
And you get the idea that she's super powerful, but she's held back somehow, or she, she has some limitations. So you're kind of reading it thinking, well, you look like you haven't lost your powers.
Mhm.
So why don't you help out? So you kind of almost start putting together these side stories and just say, well, why don't you do something? And that was kind of funny because like that's what I was really pleased with Jeff Lemire's writing is that you started talking to the characters like, well, you seem like you can do this. Go ahead,
And she's like, no, you got to work out your own problems. But if you ask me and you really want it, okay, we can work something out.
I'll check the ether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Golden Gale, which is, I think, she's the one that almost is going through like the most trauma, I think, of all of the characters in this book.
Yeah, I liked Golden Gale only because she seemed to be really well written as far as her character. Like, you got her character right away.
Yes.
And you could tell that she was still wanting to go back to her old life, where other people in the group, and we won't do any spoilers on that, but there are other people in the group seem to be just fine. Like, they're like, well, here's where we are. We're going to make a new life here. And this is where we are.
She is the one that wants out of the situation.
Yeah. And her writing is great because she is a nod to Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel on DC's side.
Otherwise known as Shazam.
Yeah.
Yes.
Except Shazam was Billy Batson.
A boy.
And when he said Shazam, he turned into
essentially
Shazam,
Superman.
Yeah. But for her, she's a young girl. No, she's an aging woman. Yep. And when she says
Seraphim,
then she turns into a young girl,
a young superpower girl. Yeah, because that was the time when the wizard, gave her the power and said, "Say my name."
Yeah,
Seraphim, okay. But that clause of, what happens to the rest of my life? Well,
you still get to live the rest of your life. It's just when you turn into a superhero, you are a child again.
Yep.
A child superhero.
And then, but she still has all of her mentality as an adult, I think, no matter what age she was. And so it was like, so she has all, like, you see her smoking and drinking, and they're like, wait, you're like a 9-year-old girl. Why are you hungover?
and the story. So if we look at sort of the overarching themes of the story, the main idea is, if you were super powered and all you did was save the world and fight crime and all that, what would eventually become your final fight?
Yes.
And most superheroes would say, well, my final fight is when I'm defeated. That's my final fight.
Yeah.
That's it. I'll do everything I can until the one day where I'm not going to get up anymore.
Yeah.
But, this story, Jeff Lemire kind of forces them to that reality of, you're not a superhero anymore because you don't know what happened, but we're throwing you into this oddly rural space.
Yeah. And this feeling of, they just did the greatest battle of their lives. And then the aftermath is, now we're just trapped. And now we have to go back to our normal lives.
Yeah, and some of them have superpowers, and some of them just don't.
Mm-hmm.
Golden Gale is in my mind, a really great little story because she keeps shouting her power word.
Yes,
she keeps wanting to turn back into a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, you kind of got the idea. There was a few little flashbacks of the interaction of the team, so right. I don't want to ruin that, but it's just, the flashbacks are well timed, and
the pacing's really good.
The pacing's good. Yeah, great. Jeff Lemire doesn't want to give away too much too soon because he knows that he wants to keep you as a reader. He doesn't have to reveal everything in the first couple issues. He wants you to kind of come to your own conclusion, and then maybe he can flip the script a little bit.
Yeah,
without you knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that each issue, almost after the first one, you get an origin story, but yet you still go back to the main story. He's still doing flashbacks, but they're not long and drawn out. You're not taking like the complete issue unless you get to the unknown hero, which is Black Hammer, which she does a whole thing about.
Black Hammer.
Black Hammer. Yes. That is another, that's another kind of thing, is that you don't really know who or what Black Hammer is until about halfway through, where he kind of mentions like, there's this giant hammer that was our recently deceased hero from the fight was Black Hammer. He kind of gave himself.
Yeah, it's like, by the way, you're watching a movie called The Terminator, and we're not going to show you who the Terminator is until halfway through the movie. But
Yeah.
he does it the right way, and I always look at to just keep touching on like the artwork and the way that the comic is laid out.
This is some of my favorite art, by the way.
Yeah, it's like the artist is paired exactly right.
Yep.
Dean Ormston is exactly right for this book. The way he draws, the way that his characters sort of have these tiny little inflections, like their mouths and their eyebrows maybe just need to raise a little bit, and you're like, oh, something's going on. He really draws each character so unique that there's no question about who that person is. Like sometimes you're watching, well, it could happen even when you're watching a movie. You're like, is that the same person I just saw in the other room? It's like you get sort of that ambiguity. But his artwork is just, I think, just so spot on, because when he draws even the flashbacks or draws each person, they each kind of have their own feel, their own story. Yeah, like it's a wild trip to just put all of this together into a flowing story. 6-7 storylines flowing together is quite a feat. It's always something when people say
something
it's hard.
people would just do these days, is just create a universe, give it its own identity, and flesh it out.
Yeah, pick all these characters that are based on other mainstream superheroes. So it's kind of fun for long readers, or even people who are well read in the comic book world. You start picking up on these tiny little inflections. It's like Easter eggs a little bit in the book. So you're like, oh, I get it. That's like Captain Marvel. Or, oh, I get it. That's like, it's just, It's fun to do. And it's fun to piece things together like that.
So yeah, we follow this team. We learn like the mysteries of why they can't escape, or at least them searching for why they can't escape, and then they kind of try to figure out like what the limits of this world are, especially with trying them as a superhero community trying to fit in with these townsfolk. And these townsfolk have no idea who they are as well, which is another tidbit, is that they don't really know like their crusades, their exploits, their nothing.
And I don't know if they really want to tell them that. They almost are like walking on eggshells a little bit.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, they don't really know where they are. And on the other hand, they don't want to just start like standing out so much that this town would revolt against them or something.
Mm-hmm. And they're trying to have relationships with these people.
Yeah. And they don't want to like ruin a good thing. It seems like for the most part, the city is okay with them. You can tell that they're sort of like the odd family out, like that people aren't exactly asking to hang out with them. And,
no.
It's everyone's sort of keeping to themselves.
Yeah.
And, there's a few things that Jeff Lemire does really well is if you think of a comic book, and this is how I always think of a comic book, I think of a comic book as prime real estate, right? So like you have to look at it and say, if you're going to write a 12-page story, you have to think of every part of that is prime real estate, because you don't want to have dead weight or just weird drawings that have nothing to do with anything.
Fluff.
Yeah. And then everyone's like, well, that was just a waste. Jeff Lemire tries to put together pieces through the story that make sense down the road. They don't necessarily have to make sense right away, and they don't answer all your questions right away. And that is
like
kind
that
of cool.
Cliffhanger. You still get those cliffhangers, and some books give you that, and some books don't, and they just end. And that's fine. Maybe they're starting something completely new, but at least this keeps you reeled in, keeps the pacing going, and especially in this library edition that we're reading from. That's a great way to present that.
Yeah.
Have it flow.
And that's the other advantage of a library edition comic, is that it's oversized. So it's bigger than the original comic when it came out. So it's larger for you to just sort of sit back and have a nice big volume. And it has each page in a comic is set up in a certain structure, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. It's always a you know, addition to the story, names a problem, gets to the bottom of the page, and then usually when you flip the page is the reveal.
Yeah.
You know,
It
something
picks up right away.
Yeah, something happened.
Yeah.
Flip the page. Whoa. You know, and then another scene. Scene starts, scene builds, scene gets a problem or an issue or some sort of topic comes up. You turn the page, reveal, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the idea of comics. And it was built that way because comics are really only a few pages when you think about them. I mean, you're not reading a comic that's like 50 pages.
Yeah, seldomly they're that.
Yeah,
About you're looking at about 20.
Yeah, so they
20 to
have to,
30
and then
range.
there's ads in there and things. But
Yeah.
so they have to come up with a story that, you know, number one, advances your overall arc and does some service to the characters that are in it. You know, no one wants to read a Daredevil comic or a Spider-Man comic and then be like, wait a minute, they weren't even in this. You know, so,
Yes. Oh, they were only on the cover?
Yeah.
Cool.
So in here, the Jeff Lemire story, you know, while he might focus on one character, he actually always ties it into something else, someone else, you know.
Mhm.
Even when you're reading the origin stories, which is kind of cool, he does put those together and it is fun. So you have to read them, you have to get the book.
Yep.
And just once you start, I think you'll get hooked. And
Yes.
just remember, Jeff Lemire thinks of comic book pages like I do as prime real estate, and everything has to make sense. And whether it makes sense right now or whether it makes sense 4 issues later, that's just part of it.
Right. Yeah, like I said, you know, these characters are so relatable. You want to keep learning more about them. Kind of like, okay, what did they for me was what did they do before the big event? Like, what was that world like? And even though, because this one they're trying to break out of, so I was like, okay, so what were their lives like before this? And I think that's something cool to look forward to, especially once he starts spinning out these characters more and more and developing them. That's really cool. And some of their mistakes that they've made and things like that, and kind of where they've took everything. It makes them feel really human.
Now, even though Black Hammer came out in 2017, roughly, I always say 2017 because he won the Eisner Award for Best New Series in 2017, which actually is a big deal. The Eisner Award is given out for anyone who's sort of redeveloping the genre. You know,
they're doing some
stars.
groundbreaking things.
Yeah, you know, like the Oscars are awards for actors and actresses that maybe sometimes have been around for a long time. The Eisner Award is meant to say, this is what you should be paying attention to.
Yeah.
You know, these are the groundbreaking stories that are reinventing the comic genre.
Yeah. Keeping them relevant.
Yeah. And some of them are the best. I mean, they're the best stories out there at the time. And I think it's well worthy of the Eisner Award in 2017. But the library editions are somewhat new. So they've took some time. They collected all of it. The back of the library edition, most of these collected editions will have sketches. They'll have scripts that were written for the story. They'll have maybe some initial artwork ideas, thumbnails, you know, ways that the artist has worked with the writer, and, you know, how are they going to think through this volume.
Even the black and white sketches are amazing. I love them.
Yeah, it is fun. Some library editions and some collected editions, they'll have the whole script, and
yeah,
you know, it's like you can read the script and then go back and look at the page and
see if it matches up or what unique ideas came out of it.
It's kind of interesting because, you know, most of the modern comics don't follow what's called the Marvel way. We talked about that a little bit in our first podcast, where Stan Lee would just sort of write a general outline, like bullet points, and say, how about this happens? So like for this one, it would be like there's six superheroes and they get stranded in like small town Nebraska or something, and like there, go write that, draw that. Well, this one had an obviously well fleshed out script, and then they just give that to the artist, and they leave it up to the artist to sort of come up with that. And the script is exactly what you would think of. It's like, Abraham Slam, enters the room, and he's obviously angry about something that just happened, and so everyone is quiet in the room, and you have to try to figure that out.
Yep.
And it's kind of neat how the artist puts together that, because then they work with the colorist, and they kind of put that theme together, that feel.
Yeah, what the world looks like, what the
Yeah,
characters look like.
and the colors too. I mean, if the colors are generally cold, cool colors, then something's a little more subdued. If they're warm, bright, fiery colors, it just immediately puts you in the scene and immediately brings you into like the emotion of that page.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah, I think they picked the right artists and the right colorist for this book, because I don't think if you put that team together, I don't think the book does as well.
So this one is Black Hammer Library Edition Volume 1.
Yes.
And then they have Black Hammer.
There's Volume 2, there's World of Black Hammer, and then there might be more coming out after that.
Because he's still working on the series.
Yeah, 1 and 2, yeah. And then he also is currently developing teams to spin out his characters as well. So they're all going to have their own solo series and go on, developing that backstory as well.
Yeah, and if we look at the entire lineup here, actually, there's another nice thing about Dark Horse is they always put together a reading order. And the reading order sometimes is a little out of what you would see it as a publication order, because just because the story is published in 2017 doesn't mean that Jeff Lemire doesn't want to do a little backstory this year and then throw it back in the reading order. So Black Hammer, just like we said, Black Hammer Library Edition Volume 1, The World of Black Hammer Library Edition Volume 1, and then Black Hammer Library Edition Volume 2, and then The World of Black Hammer Library Edition Volume 2. So they kind of tag team a little between Black Hammer and then The World of Black Hammer, which is mostly spin-off stories of characters that are like briefly introduced in Black Hammer is what they've decided.
Right. I kind of compare that to what Mike Mignola was doing with Hellboy as well.
Yeah. And that's the other part of it, is that just because there's these 7 Black Hammer main characters, they kind of throw these fun side stories in, like part of the origin, and they're like, by the way, this is what Frankenstein and Sherlock Frankenstein, and
right, just characters in the world.
Yeah, and then you're like, wait, who is that? I would like to learn more about that person.
Right. Well, you can go get it here.
So Jeff Lemire says, well, I'll just write a story on them, and I will have that part of it too.
Yep.
I guess that just goes part and parcel with building a world. You have to make sure that that's
it follows the rules, continuity,
available for more stories.
Yeah. I hope he does really well with this, and I look forward to reading more.
Yeah, I think Black Hammer, great. If you can pick it up, find it. And you can get that at, Amazon has it, but a lot of places, or a lot of books that we buy is from instocktrades.com.
Yeah.
It's just a great site. They have a great selection.
Yep.
And
plethora of titles.
Anything you can think of is usually on there. And if it's sold out on there, it doesn't mean that it's totally sold out everywhere. It's just
the hunt is on.
The hunt is on, yes. If it's sold out there, then you've got to start looking, and that means everywhere, from eBay to everywhere else. But they are usually just part of the group with Tales of Wonder and a few other places that deal with comic books and really sourcing these kinds of great editions. So I would encourage everyone to pick this one up.
Thank you for joining
Bam Pow
Comics. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.